So we're getting ready to fit the push rods and push rod tubes to the engine, and then we'll put the rocker boxes on top of that. So rocker box tubes, pretty iconic on a Triumph. So there's the tappet block, and then a small gasket goes on. Then on top of the gasket goes this little metal cup, open side upwards. Then on top of the cup goes a sort of rubber seal, and then on top of that will then go the push rod tube, and then around the top we'll push that on, that slides on. There's another rubber seal at the top which slides into the rocker boxes. Okay, and that's the order of assembly. The only couple of things of note is that these are alloy pushrod tubes. I inspected I was sent 5 pushrod tubes, and when I inspected them, I actually found out that 3 of them were quite badly damaged. Obviously, at some point, I think the pushrods had jumped out somehow, and on 3 of them, they were quite badly damaged. So I had to buy 2 new pushrods tubes, and the only pushrod tubes you can buy now are alloy, which is great because I think they are better than the original tin chrome. But that's why we've got 2 alloy and 2 chrome now. The second thing to note are the actual rubber seals. Now, the actual standard seals are these white sort of semi-translucent ones. And as you can see, they've got a slight curve on them, a slightly concave edge, and they seal okay. But these are what's called X-ring seals. If you look at the edge, it's a sort of more pronounced beading on the edges. And I've always used these X-ring seals, and I've never had a leak, which, from a pushrod Triumph is saying something. So I think they're great. So the gasket sets always come with these white ones, so just don't use those, and just order a set of these rubbers. And there we go, focus. Okay, these are called X-ring, or they've got another name as well, I can't remember, but X-ring's fine. So what I normally do is I will put well seal on the tappet block, and then well seal on the bottom of there, and then after that I won't use sealant, so that goes on dry on there. Probably can't do that now, we won't balance, I don't know. And then on the top will go the other X-ring seal, slid onto there, and that's it. Now, the only other factor of note really on that is what's called the crush. So when you put the rocker boxes on, they should go down, and they should crush between this lip and this lip on the tubes. There should be, obviously it needs to squeeze that ring down to crush it down to get a seal. Now, if you've not got enough crush, then obviously it's not going to crush the seal, and you're not going to get an oil seal. If you've got too much, then it's going to mangle the seal. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, I can never remember what the gap is supposed to be. But what you basically, there is supposed to be a perfect gap to create the crush. To be honest, I've never had a problem. So to be honest, I just fit them, and they're generally fine. But just be aware that too much crush in it or too little crush, neither is good. You just want a bit of crush so that when you tighten down, that top seal and the bottom seal are compressed, and when they compress, they make an oil tight seal. Okay, so beginning to assemble pushrod tubes and rocker boxes. So gasket, I'm trying to do this one-handed. Gasket on first, that's already been well sealed. And then the little metal retaining cups, and then one of the X-ring rubber crush rings. I don't think I can do that one-handed. It slips down over the tappet block, but I'm going to need both hands for that, so I'm just going to slide that down now. So there we go, we've got the gasket and then the metal cup and then the rubber crush ring, and I'm going to now repeat that with the other 3 tappet blocks. Okay, we've got those seals all in place, and we make sure that they're seated properly, that they haven't like rolled round as we slid them on. And then I've got the pushrod tubes, and I've put the rubber seal on the tops, and then I'm simply going to slide them down and loosely, just loosely for now, just leave them in position. So slide them down through the top. Sometimes, like that one, they need a bit of fiddling, but they'll go in. Okay, and then I'll do the same with the exhaust. I've decided to put the chrome ones on the inlet and the alloy on the exhaust. No particular reason for that. I've got 2 of each. I have to put them somewhere. Okay, so next we've got the push rods themselves. So when I took them out, I marked them exhaust right, T for top. So I know that this is the right hand side exhaust push rod, and that's the top. And they're all marked like that, so they should be going back in the same place. To be honest, you know, it's not essential, but it's just good practice to put things back in the same place if you haven't replaced things. Okay, and then what I've done is on a triple, you've got 2 push rods in one of the tubes and 1 push rod in the other one. So the push rod tube on the timing side on a triple that has 2 push rods in, what I do is I just put a bit of Tipp-Ex around the top of the tubes, and sorry, the top of the outer tubes, and then when I put the push rods in, then I know that that's the outer tube, because sometimes they loll in there and you can't tell which one's which. You know, when you come to put the actual rockers on, you can, it's possible to actually get them switched over. So that's what I do. Then I know that the one with the blobs on are on the outside. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put them just loosely onto the tappet. But before I do that, of course, I'm going to cover the tips and that in assembly lube. Okay, so I'm just going to fit the push rod. So I can obviously the cover is only very loosely fitted. So I'll take this push rod, the inlet center. I'm going to put it down, and I'll put it down onto where I think is the correct tappet, and then I've got the outer one with its Tipp-Ex on. Okay, let's have a look now. And so then I can lift this up and work out. No, actually I got that wrong. So there we go. There, that's now on the correct tappet. So then I'll put this one in. And if I can with one hand, I'm going to lift it up again. Yep, and they're now seated on their tappets. And I know that that's the outer one and that's the inner one. So even if they get like crossed over like that, I know that's the outer one. And all I'm going to do now is go around and lower the push rods down onto each tappet, making doubly sure that they are actually seated on the tappet and not just on the block. Of course, there's only 1 tappet on the drive side and 2 on the timing side. So the push rods are now fitted, and I've double checked to make sure they're sitting on their tappets at the bottom. And what I'm going to do next is I'm now going to fit the gasket. Now the gaskets are a bit weird because there's only actually gasket facing in 3 places, but the gasket's joined together with these like bridges to make it 1 gasket. And that gasket tends to interfere with the pushrod tube. So I'm going to put these on, and then what I do is going to I'm doing everything one-handed at the moment. I'm then going to actually lift the push rods out the way, because they then sit on top of the gasket. Okay, let's try that one. Now, I just have to sort of wangle them down a bit, you know, just have to pull the pushrod tubes out of the way, just to make sure the gasket's lying flat and it's underneath this lip, not on top of it. Okay, and that's good because it holds the pushrods in the right position. And then we'll do the same with the exhaust gasket. So it goes on. Oh look, I might be able to get that one. Ooh, that one I think has slid in underneath. That's good. There we go, same with that one there. So slid in, and so again the gasket's underneath the lip on the pushrod tube. Obviously we had well seal on there. On the cylinder head, I'm going to put some lube in the top of these push rods, and I've put well seal on the rocker boxes. So then what I'm going to do is, when I'm ready, nearly ready now, to actually put the rocker boxes onto the cylinder head. Right, I think we're about ready. So I've put a little bit of oil in the top of the push rods, and I've also smeared a very little bit of, when I say oil, assembly lube, I've smeared a very little bit on the top of the valve stems as well. So everything's just got that little bit of lube when on initial startup. Right, so what we're going to do next is we're just going to lift the actual rocker boxes into position, ready to line everything up and bolt it down, which is a bit easier to say than to do, but that's what we're doing. The main thing, of course, is that we have to make sure that the rockers actually sit in the push rods and in the right push rod, so they're not seated properly in the right push rod and they're not going to jump out. And of course, doing everything at once and lining everything up is a bit of a fiddle. So that's why in the back of the rocker box covers there's these inspection holes, so that you can look in and you can check that the push rod is seated properly on its rocker. Okay, that's why there are these 4 inspection holes in the back of the rocker boxes. Okay, that's about it. I think we're ready now to go on. And when I put them on, I'm very loosely going to just put them on with 4 bolts to begin with. So most of the bolts that hold the rocker box on are actually cylinder head bolts that go through the rocker box and the cylinder head down into those pillar bolts at the top of the cylinder barrel. So they're actually, you see the big holes, they're actually cylinder head studs. There are 4, the 4 outer corner ones are just for the rocker box, and these 3 at the front, which we'll come on to in a minute. So when I put them on, I'm just going to hold them down to begin with these 4 corner ones, just to make sure everything's in place, and then we'll move on from there afterwards. Right, we're going to try and put the exhaust rocker box on first. Don't forget that it's marked with an E for exhaust, so you know it's that one. And I've got a couple of screwdrivers and things to route about in there to try and make sure that these are located properly, but it's always a fiddle. It's pretty straightforward, you know. It just lowers this down. We just got to make sure that these locate with the holes and that we get the rockers on the actual push rod. Okay, that was easier because of course this rocker box wasn't in the way. Now I'm going to do the inlet rocker box, and it's a bit harder because of course the exhaust rocker box is now in the way. Right, and now we need to fit the Allen screws to the front lip of the rocker boxes. And if you remember when we dismantled the engine, I had a right job prizing out the remains of the old washers, and these are the washers. They are little aluminium crush washers, if I can say that properly, crush washers. And so what we do is they go in the front lip of the rocker boxes, and they sit in there. There we go. And then when I tighten this Allen screw down, they will crush. But they are a bit prone to leak. A, because people don't realise they're in there and they put other ones on top and so on, so it just makes a right mess. But B, they leak anyway. So my solution to that is I put thread lock. That's a surprise. I put thread lock on the threads, because what happens is they leak down through the threads and it comes out here. So the actual gasket takes care of any leak from there, but then if it carries on down the threads, it comes out the bottom. So I just put thread lock on, and that stops any oil sneaking down past the threads. So I'm going to put all those, now while I've got the rocker box on loosely, then I'm going to insert these just to make sure they locate properly before I tighten everything down. Okay, I've got the rocker boxes on loosely now. What I forgot to mention was I slackened off all the adjusters, and as I put them down, I kept the adjusters tight on just on the valve stems to make sure that the other end of the rocker stayed in the push rod, but without straining the rocker. So I loosen these off as I put the rocker down. Then I've loosely inserted the Allen screws in the front lip with the aluminium washers underneath, and thread lock on all the threads. And now I'm only loosely putting in the cylinder head studs. There are 4 slightly longer ones. They're the outer ones that are already in, because you can see that they're slightly higher. They're slightly higher than the middle. In the middle, there's 4 slightly shorter ones that go in the 4 middle holes. And what I'm doing is I'm just going to loosely screw these in, because then I can start turning over the engine and checking that all the valves are working and everything's seated properly, but only loosely. But I want to put these head bolts in, as I say, only loosely before I start turning the engine over, because otherwise there's no support. There's these 2 bolts and then these 3 at the front, and there's a huge amount of pressure on these rockers as they push the valves in. Right, that's great. I've got the rocker boxes now loosely assembled. Everything's just sort of semi-tight, and I've just turned the engine over and adjusted the tappets very roughly, so there's a bit of play on each tap. Right, I'm just getting ready to torque down the cylinder head bolts now. So they're done in a like an X pattern, starting at the beginning and working out. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it's like an X and then 2, 2, 2, 2, like that. And what we do is, and the reason for that is metal is actually fluid. It is actually liquid. It does actually move, and so we tighten the middle down first and then spread to the outside. If you tighten the outsides down first, then you're left with a little bubble like in the middle, which is then hard to flatten. So you flatten and then so it's like, I don't know, putting a piece of pastry down, you start in the middle and then work out. Put the outside down, then you can end up with a crinkle in the middle. Something like that anyway. So just a little bit at a time. Now the other thing is that in the manual you tighten these down to 18 foot-pounds. So I of course along with many other people, ignore that, and I do mine up to 22, especially with a composite gasket, which takes a bit of crush on it. Okay, and I think I'm right in saying that even those people that use a copper gasket put theirs down to 22 now as well. I'm not sure, but I do mine to 22 and it seems to work fine. There, I think we're done now for first Titan. As I say, I normally, with the composite gasket, I normally tighten it down pretty much as soon as the engine's started. Or I might just take it around the block, but that's as far as I'll take it, and then tighten everything down again. And readjust the tappets, because it's amazing how things settle down after that first engine startup. You can turn the engine over as many times as you want, like now on the bench, but you know, it doesn't make up for like 5,000 revs or whatever that really settles it. Right, going to set the tappets. So we're going to set them at 8 thou gap on the exhaust and 6 thou on inlet. Now some people set them at 10 thou and 8 thou. I think myself that's really for racing when the engine gets absolutely red hot and you need that much of a bigger gap to allow for the expansion. For normal riding, I think 6 thou and 8 thou, but you know, that's up to the individual. I'm setting these exhausts at 8 thou, so I've got my feeder gauges and I've bent them to make it easier to get the gauge in, because they're always I'm on the wrong tappet for it. That's why I won't go in for a start. Right, so we put it there in between the top of the valve stem and the adjuster, and what we're looking for is we just want it to be there, sort of a nice tight slide, not too tight, not too loose. That's 8 thou. Now then the problem is holding the adjuster whilst doing up the nut, because what tends to happen is, of course, the adjuster tightens as you tighten up the lock nut, and then the actual adjustment is all to pop. Yep, still pretty good. Yeah. Okay, so that's the first one done. Right, I'm now going to refit the inspection caps. So I'll double check to make sure that the rockers are engaged fully and properly with the pushrod tubes. As I said, it happened to me once when, and it happened to other people. You think it's engaged, but it's not. It's like on the edge. You start the engine and it pops out. Anyway, I've double checked, they're fine, and I've now got the inspection caps. One thing to notice is, again, like most inspection caps, they've got a little O-ring seal. Now, years and years ago when I first rebuilt my T160 engine, I didn't bother replacing these seals because I thought, well, why bother? They're not going to leak. An inspection cap in the back of the rocker box, the rubber. Well, okay, it might be old, but it'll be fine. Of course, it leaked like a sieve. And the thing was, the T160 with this slanting engine, what happened was oil came out on the crankcase here. So I thought, oh, it's leaking from the cylinder base, or it's leaking from the pushrod tube. So I actually took the whole top end off twice. I took it off the first time, but I thought it was leaking from the cylinder base. It wasn't. So I took the whole thing off again because I thought it was leaking from the pushrods. It wasn't. It was just these. All it was were these little rubber O-rings. It was like a 5 minute, less than that to change them, and it was sorted. You know, you've got to be careful with oil leaks, you see, because it slants. The oil was running unseen down onto the top of the cylinder head, down towards the back of the pushrod tubes, down the back of the pushrod tubes, and then out onto the crankcase. And that took me about, I don't know, 6 months at least to sort that leak out. And as I say, I had to rebuild this whole top end. I rebuilt it twice, all because of the sake I hadn't changed the little O-ring seals in these inspection caps. And then for doing up these caps, this is quite a neat little tool. You can get it from most Triumph suppliers. It's simply, it's got a like a tongue at one end, and that goes in the groove. I don't know if you can see that, but it goes in the groove of the, I'll try and make it, well, I don't know if you can see it. It goes in the groove of the cap, and then you've got a spanner, and you simply tighten it up with the spanner whilst holding it in position. There we go. Get it nice and tight, and that way it won't leak. Yeah, you have to be oil leaks. You know, people jump to conclusions all the time about oil leaks. Most people think their engine is leaking from the bottom because that's where the oil's dripping from. Well, oil is sneaky. I always say it's sneaky. You can't see it, especially when it's new, but even when it's old, you can't see it. And what it does, it might be leaking high up the engine anywhere, and then it runs down, it finds a way to run down. And the only way you actually see it is when it drips off the bottom. But that's not where it's leaking from, that's just where it's dripping from. So all that's left now are the inspection covers on the front for adjusting the tappets. And I'll just tell you what I do with them. I put well seal on the covers, but not on the rockers, not on the rocker box. So then I've got the cover with a gasket stuck to it, and I put that on, and because I know I'm going to be taking it off pretty almost immediately to reset the tappets when the engine starts, and so you haven't got all that horrible goo. And then at some point in the future when the engine's settled down a bit, if I want to, if there's any leaks, then I can well seal this and put it on. But to be honest, they don't tend to leak from these faces. They're good at that. So to be honest, you often never need to put well seal here. And so you can just take the cover off, adjust the tappets and put it back on. Anyway, that's what I'm doing for now. I'll just well seal the cover, not the rocker box, put the gasket, stick it on to like the cover and put it on, and we're done. Okay, we've got the rocker box covers. Like the rocker boxes themselves, they are sided, handed, so this one EX for exhaust. I've put a new stud in here, if you remember there was one missing. And that just goes on. Whoops, make sure it's the right way up. They will only actually go one way round because these studs aren't actually in the middle, they're actually offset either side. There's a couple of strange things about these end bolts. Number one, they're UNF, so they're fine thread, which is strange because you're screwing into alloy. So as I've said before, if you're screwing into alloy, the threads are normally coarse because it's so the metal's soft and it's so easy to strip them. But for reasons which I really don't know, for some reason these 4 threads are UNF. That's the first thing. The second thing is the bolt on this corner, just this corner, is slightly longer than the other 3 because there's a bracket that goes on there, and that holds the cable for the tacho comes up there, and it can burn on this exhaust pipe. So there's a little bracket there that goes onto the tacho, and there we go. Top end all buttoned up. Very happy. Very happy. All done and dusted. We just got to put the inlet manifolds on, got to put the center exhaust manifold on, and the oil pipes on the end of the camshaft, rocker shafts, and we're all done. Obviously we need some plugs in. I'm not going to put plugs in because we're going to be turning the engine over later on when we've got the electric start on to circulate the oil, so no plugs yet. But yeah, that's good. Push rod's looking good. We've got chrome at the back, alloy at the front, and yeah, beginning to really look like an engine again. So, you know, I'm really pleased. Very pleased. Say hello to your brother over there. Yeah, you're gonna grow up to look like him one day. Oh, yes, you are. Oh, you are. You will look beautiful.